amazing viewers. Thank you so much for joining me on my program once again. I appreciate you wherever you are connecting from. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please kindly subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell so that you'll be notified each time I upload a video. You will be among the first to receive it. Thank you so much and remain blessed. Whenever you look my video, whenever you watch my video, share the video to all platforms. Share it to family and friends. Share it in your WhatsApp group so that people can get information on what is happening in the contraption called Nigeria, mainly against the Biafrans, against the Duduas, against the indigenous people in the contraption called Nigeria. I try as much as possible to set the record straight. I don't preach hate speech. I don't speak against people. I set the record straight. The only important thing I do here is to make sure that the plight of the people remains on the front burner and the world will know the true story of what is going on in the contraption called Nigeria.
And tonight, our attention is on the Buhari government agenda to fight corruption and on the issues of the rule of law. Fighting corruption is part of the three main agenda of the ruling APC when they came into power in 2015, which they said they will vigorously pursue. But almost 7 years down the line, how far has those promises, especially in relation to corruption and the rule of law, been kept? Tonight, our guest is the #1 law officer in the land. He was the national legal advisor of the defunct Congress for Progressive Change, CPC. He was actively involved in the formation of the All Progressives Congress, APC, in 2013 as a resource person to the manifesto drafting subcommittee of interjoint party merger committees between the CPC. In 2015, he was appointed as the Attorney General of the Federation. Tonight, we have the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He joins us here in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sheon.
And a Happy New Year. This is the first time I'm seeing you this year, though.
Thank you very much, Sheon. Same with you. Same
I think we should begin on what perhaps is one major role that President Buhari hung on your neck when you assumed office is to fight corruption, apart from just being the chief law officer of the land. And if you look at it, Nigeria continued a spiral fall on the corruption perception index for a 5th consecutive time, making Nigeria a second most corrupt country in West Africa after Guinea. In spite of all of these, administration says it is doing in fighting corruption. Now, let me get your reaction to the Transparency International report.
Well, I think the major considerations that should constitute the basis for assessment of the successes of the Nigerian government as far as the fight against corruption should not be an exclusive position of the Transparency International. Other institutions of refuge that obtains in the system include United Nations, UNODC, United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes, among others, and the empirical evidence that is visibly seen as it relates to the efforts of Buhari's government in the fight against corruption. So now, coming to the international institutes or associations or associations of refuge. The assessment of United Nations Office of Drugs and Corruption, the latest assessment, which was a 2019 assessment of Nigeria as a nation, was the fact that among the 17 items of assessment, Nigeria has indeed done wonderfully well, and I'm talking of wonderfully well as the operative word, in terms of the fight against corruption as it relates to the 17 items. So when you now juxtapose the position of United Office of Drugs and Crimes against the position of Transparency International in terms of reputation, that places a fundamental question mark on the Transparency International assessment. Now, if you are talking of the international perhaps commendations associated with it further, the position of the United Nations Office of, on Drugs and Crimes has been further consolidated by the fact that the African Union has indeed recognized President Mohammadu Buhari as the champion of anti-corruption. And then if you are talking of the empirical physical evidence on the ground as far as the Nigerian state is concerned, in terms of the institutional performance as it relates to the corruption and the fight against corruption, Here we are as a government that now inherited in prosecution and conviction sense about 130 convictions as at 2014, 2015 when we came in as a government by the EFCC. I'm now talking of the institutions. And then today, as at the end of 2021, within a year, Nigeria has recorded over 2,000 convictions by EFCC. So if you are talking of the year in, year out empirical evidence as it relates to the performance of our institutions, one single institution, I'm talking of EFCC for that matter, it establishes a point that Transparency International Corruption Index, against the background of the international position as it relates to UNODC report, against the background of the commendation by the African Union as it relates to the commendation of President Buhari, and empirical evidence as it relates to the performance of EFCC, it goes without saying that there is no basis upon which the Transparency International report can stand.
All right. And let me ask you, Honorable Minister, Transparency International as an organization, how would you rate it? From a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how would you rate that organization?
Well, if you are talking of the international refutation, perhaps, I think juxtaposing the position of Transparency International against the position of UNODC, I think I leave you to answer the question. But the truth of the matter is, when you are talking of the United Nations, everybody knows without question where the refutation, where the basis, the empirical basis for assessment stand. So if you are talking of Transparency International and then United Nations, your Office of Drugs and Crimes, where does the answer in terms of reputation, in terms of standing, in terms of universality of position stand? My answer is United Nations institutions are refuted to be the best institutions for international assessment of issues.
So this government does not rate in any way Transparency International?
The universal position of government, the universal position of United Nations office speaks for the government. So as far as we are concerned, when you are talking of Transparency International and then you are now talking of United Nations office on drugs and crimes, then the answer as far as we are concerned is in rating sense, the same way the Transparency International is rating institutions. If you rate the position of Transparency International as against that of United Nations office, my answer is United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes stands clear. And then if you are talking of the assessment as far as the West Africa or perhaps the African states are concerned, the fact that the government of President Mohammadu Buhari has been commended, and indeed his person has now been rated as the champion of anti-corruption, it now establishes a point that there is no basis, no foundation, no justiciable ground, and indeed no standing upon which the transparency report can stand.
So specifically for the benefit of our viewers who are watching it tonight, so that they can get you clearly, this government does not in any way reckon with Transparency International and its report.
International recon has been established by United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes.
Because the reason why I'm asking, Nigeria is not the only country that is being assessed here. Almost 200 countries around the world have been assessed. Nigeria, before your government came into power, have been assessed. But now the report is saying Nigeria has dropped for the 5th consecutive time. The question is, Honorable Minister, when you attend international community, this Transparency International report keeps denting the image of the country. And when you say that you don't reckon with it based on your own assessment of it, it still keeps denting the image of the country. What do you do about that?
Well, the image of the country, as far as I'm concerned, within the context of Committee of Nations, within the context of international assessment or by institutions of refuge, is the fact the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes has established a point. And then if you are talking of assessment within the context of African nations, this is a Transparency International assessment that is saying Nigeria is coming down the ladder in terms of successes associated with it. But the African nations this time around coming together to now commend the government of President Mohammadu Buhari in terms of the fight against corruption. It establishes a point that at the point of international universality of assessment, we have indeed been acknowledged as doing wonderfully well by the United Nations Office of on Crimes and Drugs, and then within the context of the regional perception, here is a government that has now been commended. Here is the president that has now been commended in terms of it. And within the empirical consideration of it, this is a government that now came to power at a time when convictions record of an institution, one of the institutions, anti-corruption institution for that matter, has a record of 130 in a year. And then the government has recorded over 2,000 convictions within a year.
Because,
so it does not support...
Honorable Minister, if you look at it, I mean, we should look at it from some other prism. Now, how do you react then to some people who have said, look, in fact, corruption under this government is even far-reaching. And when you ask for evidence, the people say, oh, it's just motion, a lot of motion without specific and actual movement.
Well, the movement, as far as the fight against corruption, is established by convictions. I think you can rightly believe or agree with me in that perception. So if you have a record of 103 at a point in 2014, 2015, and then you now have a record of over 2,000 in 2021, it goes without saying that the motion you are looking for in terms of the fight against corruption is there. So the logical conclusion arising therefrom is this government is doing wonderfully well in terms of attack, enforcement, prevention of corruption within the index of empirical available evidence that can visibly be seen. The empirical evidence is to the effect that we have recorded more convictions, investigations are ongoing, and then there are no restrictions or limit to the consideration in terms of investigation and prosecution of high-profile cases.
Let me ask you about these
much more
cases,
in terms of speed as far as the conclusion and determination of cases are concerned.
Let me ask you, I mean, you mentioned high-profile cases, but there are worries about the state of some of these, the status of some of these high-profile cases. Because for some people, they will say, look, it's just a matter of there seems to be some delay mechanism. Just maybe people can forget about some of these high-profile cases. Can you give us status report on some of these high-profile cases and perhaps the reason why they are being delayed?
Well, in terms of delay, I think you can agree with me very well, and rightly so for that matter, that as far as this government is concerned, the idea of delay in prosecution of cases and their determination does not arise. Why? Because if you are looking at it from the perspectives of legislative framework, this is the government that is administering and indeed enforcing the provisions of our Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which allows for day in, day out prosecution of cases. And over and above that, in terms of volume and number of convictions recorded relating to high-profile cases, I would like to mention names, but you know very well those that are indeed convicted within the lifespan and context of this administration as it relates to high-profile convictions recorded. You know very well those that are standing trials within the context and lifespan of this government in terms of high-profile cases. So added over and above the investigations, prosecutions, and indeed the convictions of the 2,000 cases recorded, convictions recorded by EFCC in 2021, a lot of them are higher profile cases. So what are you talking about in terms of delay? Again, the background of the fact that over 2,000 convictions are recorded within a year.
There are politically exposed cases. There are high-profile cases. Let me draw out a few of them so that maybe you can respond to them specifically.
Yes.
The case of the former Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Babachi Lawa, what is the status of that case?
Is it presented before the court or is not?
It is presented before the court.
So when a matter is subjected and presented before the court for determination, whose responsibility is it in terms of speed and determination? My answer is a matter has been investigated, a matter has been presented before a court of law for prosecution, and the speed associated with it, against the background of the existing law, Administration of Criminal Justice Act, that allows for day in, day out, you cannot, by any stretch of imagination, place a blame associated with the conclusion and determination of that case on the doorstep of the executive.
So you blame the judiciary for it?
It is exclusively a judicial affair.
Are you trying to resolve some of these delays?
We are.
Because it's part of what Nigeria, you have promised in your own time, that you will work on ensuring judicial reforms in our judicial system.
Yes, and we have brought in a lot of reforms within the context of speedy determination of cases. Among those that are brought to bear, that has indeed contributed to the successes we have recorded in terms of volume and number is the application, enforcement, and operation of Administration of Criminal Justice Act, among others. So we have taken steps in legislative sense by providing a legislative framework. We have taken steps in due diligence in the prosecution of cases, which has eventually resulted to multiple convictions within a span of a year. So again, the background of the fact that we have provided the legislative framework, we have taken steps in diligent prosecution of cases, and we have indeed recorded successes in terms of multiplication of volume of convictions within a period of time. It is a clear pointer that we have indeed promised and eventually succeeded in delivering.
What about the case of Hush Puppy? Any update on that?
Well, as you rightly know, it is an issue that has both national and international dimensions. And in respect of the two, actions have been taken. It's a work in progress locally and internationally, and we are doing whatever it takes to ensure justice is done within the context of the law, regardless of the personalities involved.
In the work that the FBI is doing, the prosecution, is it helping the Nigerian case? We are hearing and seeing a result on the side of the Americans. So why are we not seeing much on the side of on our side here? You
see, issues that has to do with criminality and the enforcement of laws associated with crimes and offenses may have local international coloration. But then in the case of Hush Puppy, as you rightly know, multiple jurisdictions are involved. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, America, and indeed Nigeria. So within the context of the International Committee of Nations as it relates to the prosecution of cases, the international community is indeed collaborating and providing the necessary supports for the purpose of ensuring that justice is done to the case with the, with the peculiarities of the matter taken into consideration. So what I'm saying in essence, that internationally and locally, all hands are on deck.
What about the Nigerian side of things? America is doing its own. We see that prosecution is going on in America. But in Nigeria, there are other allied matters, facts related to the issue in America.
Nigeria,
what is being done on Nigerian soil?
When criminality is involved, Nigeria and US, for example, naturally works together when there are elements of the offenses that have, that has taken place in the diverse jurisdictions. So Nigeria is indeed doing the needful by way of supporting what the America is doing for the purpose of ensuring that the cases are tried accordingly within the context of the American aspect of it. And then eventually, if there is need for local prosecution, nothing as well stops it. So what I'm saying, in essence, it is about the international collaboration, and then we are seeing the result of the international collaboration in ensuring that those that are alleged to have in one way or the other been, in one way or the other, operating in abuse of the position of the law are now brought to justice.
So there's nothing concrete on Hush Puppy from now?
No, there are a lot of things concrete in terms of joint investigation and in terms of considering
where are
the
we
outcome.
Exactly on that?
Well, you see, as far as investigation is concerned, where we are now, it is about collaboration. and then we are collaborating both.
So
with
there is no
UAE.
prosecution happening here in Nigeria
Not
yet?
immediately yet.
What about Haba Kyari, the police officer, that is linked to the matter?
Well, generally speaking, as I have stated earlier, it is about international collaboration. We are collaborating, we are working, and then it is work in progress.
But the Haba Kyari matter is not about collaboration. It's about the investigation that was instituted on Nigerians within the police, and also when linked to your office.
But there are components of it. It is of international dimension. One thing I can tell you
so
about
what's the outcome of the investigation from Nigerian side?
Well, there are a lot of issues that are ongoing, inclusive of the possibility of consideration for extradition associated things. That is where the collaboration element of it comes into play, in respect of all the two cases.
So there's a possibility of extradition?
There could be a need or perhaps the possibility of making such requests, and they are looking into it.
Was there a request for extradition?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the parties are discussing, the parties are collaborating, and then there are exchange of correspondence from the perspectives of investigation, from the perspectives of extradition and associated things.
Is the police officer found guilty from the investigation?
You can't find someone guilty. You can't find someone guilty, but perhaps the reasonable grounds for suspicion can be established, who will translate to prosecution that will eventually translate.
Because the panel has a quasi-judicial role and function. So they could also, of course, find some kind of culpability in their investigation.
Prima facie case, that is what we are talking of, reasonable grounds for suspicion. Reasonable grounds for suspicion has been established, and that will eventually translate to the possibility of prosecution and eventual conviction, if indeed, at the end of the day, the one is adjudged guilty by a court of law.
So what is the position now? Extradition or prosecution?
The position now is there are prima facie ground, reasonable grounds for suspicion that have been considered from the perspectives of prosecution, from the perspective of likely extradition, if the need for so doing arises. That is what is unfolding in terms of international collaboration. All
right, Honorable Minister, we'll take a breather, get a cup of water. Then when we come back, there's still so much more to talk about on the issue of the rule of law and the fight against corruption under the APC government. We have the #1 law officer in the land, and we're talking about what this government is doing to fight corruption as it promises and its perception on the rule of law. Stay with us, everyone. Our conversation with the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, continues right after now. Welcome back, everyone. Our conversation tonight is with the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and the Ministry of Justice, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Abubakar Malami. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sheil.
We're just talking about some high-profile cases. Another case in point is the case of the former EFCC chairman, Mr. Ibrahim Magu. It does look like the investigation happened, everything just went under, and nothing has been heard. What is the latest? As you return to the police force, what can you tell us? What's the status report on that?
It's a work in progress, Sheil.
So what does work in progress mean?
Well, naturally, when you are talking of a government, particularly when issues are complex in terms of multiplicity, you may have a component that could be administrative. You may have a component that could have some criminal undertones in terms of perhaps maybe reasonable grounds for suspicion. And you may have components that could require additional investigation for the purpose of taking position. So these complexities naturally are not issues that you can take clear-cut position overnight. You allow institutions, because multiple institutions are involved. If you are a public officer, for example, and then there is an allegation against you of living above your means, the code of conduct may have a role to play. If criminality is involved in terms of an allegations of commission of a crime, certain criminal investigations either by the police or indeed the EFCC, ICPC could come into play. If you are talking about administrative issues as it relates to a police officer, perhaps the the Police Service Commission may equally have a role to play. So with this kind of complexities associated with an issue of investigation, you must have to allow the agencies of government responsible for each and every item under consideration to now take necessary steps.
But Minister, we thought that has happened. How long does it take to deal with the case of one person? The report, we understand the presidency had gotten the report. The man has been replaced at the EFCC. Is he back in the service now? Do you know whether he's back in the service? Or what is his status right now?
Well, I think at a point what happened, he was placed on suspension and Mr. President has taken a decision to allow someone to act. So with that in mind, you understand, and the report having been received, it is only logical to consider allowing the other agencies of government that have one role or the other to play to do what they are supposed to do in terms of conclusion of the report for the purpose of arriving at a decisive position. And I think that is how much I can say as far as
because the reason why I'm asking this question is that there are a lot of inference that have been drawn into it, like a political undertone, persecution. A lot of things have been drawn. And so it would be good to know that a tone of finality has been drawn into this matter. That's why Nigerians will want to know tonight where that case has landed, or is it buried forever, or is it been concluded? Is there a note of finality? That's what Nigerians would like to know.
When you talk of the government of President Mohammadu Buhari, it's a government that has no reputational issues of reputation as far as political persecution is concerned. So the idea of perhaps an insinuation of political persecution does not arise, taking into consideration the fact that it is a government that is built on integrity, it is a government that is built on due process and allowing things to take their natural course devoid of impunity. So the idea of political persecution does not in the circumstances arise, but certainly out of caution to ensure due process, to ensure things are done within the context of the law and due process.
So you mean that there is investigation or prosecution? You've gone past investigation, is prosecution on the case of Magu?
So what I'm saying in essence is you allow the institutions that I have mentioned, among others, to do the needful in terms of arriving at finality before a final decision is taken, and that is what makes it work in progress, and they are indeed doing the needful as far as their respective statutory duties are concerned.
I have a long list of questions which I'd like to take you up on, so I'd like to take them quickly. Yes. The issue of the Ikoyi monies, those dollars that were found in Ikoyi, where are they? What is the end point of those monies?
Well, honestly, I have to refer back to records to refresh my memory. But one thing I think you need to know is the fact that the issue was an issue that was indeed handled by an agency of the government. So I have not been, as of today, I wasn't expecting this question, so I have not taken my time to seek for clarifications for the purpose of briefing. So I'm not in a position to say clearly. But one thing that I want to state categorically and clearly, that any monies that are indeed forfeited to the federal government, final forfeiture, are indeed supposed to be part of the monies meant to service budget. So I'm not in a position to clearly say with precision as to whether such final forfeiture.
You know why we need to know some of the, because these monies are Nigerian monies,
yes,
right? One, two, Nigerians want to get closure into some of these issues because there are a lot of issues. Do you promise that you're going to get back as a matter of statement from your office so that we can know on that for those who are watching now, so that since you don't have the fact that we might be able to get a letter from your office?
Well, I assure you that against the background of the question presented and perhaps the desire of the Nigerians to know what the position is, I will certainly reserve that point for the later day in terms of giving a comprehensive and precise position. Right. But one thing I think that needs to be stated categorically, that in our budget of 2020, 2021, and 2022, we have a component of budget servicing that relates to the recovered assets. And if indeed there has been a final forfeiture order relating to that money, it means by implication that that money must have been applied to the servicing of the budget. But as I stated, I will certainly get clarifications and perhaps maybe during our next interview.
Two quick ones, Minister.
Yes.
One is on the issue of the Abacha loot. What is the status update on that?
Well, the status of it, as you know very well, 2 major recoveries were made, or perhaps 3. One, it was a recovery made in, from Switzerland in 2017, which monies were applied in social investment programs, which constituted a budget item in that year. And that was the money that was applied in the N-Power, in the market women trader money, and the associated public works support programs. And that money was effectively utilized for that purpose. And then another one, that was the money recovered in 2020, which was recovered from US, Island of Jersey, and indeed UK, which was around 311, which was applied in the 3 major projects by the understanding among the participating nations, which projects were Abuja, Kanu, Lagos, Ibadan, and second Niger Bridge. And as you rightly know, these projects are indeed being executed with greater speed, to the extent that even the second Niger Bridge has indeed reached an advanced stage. So those monies were recovered, those monies were applied. And then additional money that was indeed recovered was over $70 million arising from Malabu, which was equally an offshoot of the Abacha loot, which was equally applied to this project. So what I am trying to say, in essence, there were recoveries made, and then the monies were, by the parties' agreement, agreed to be applied to specific projects, and those money were fact of the budget, and then were indeed expended accordingly.
So we're expecting a large tranche, another tranche now?
Yes, we are working
on... When is that due?
Well, you see, in terms of international recoveries, you cannot be certain in time sense. But then we have reached advanced stage, and then mutual draft agreements have been exchanged and considered. So we are looking at the possibility of having such money, additional money recovered in shortest possible time.
Quickly, too, a former governor of Imo State, Rocha Asorock, went to the president last week and reported the EFCC. He alleged political witch hunt against him on a matter he said was a settled case. You oversight over the EFCC. What's your reaction on that matter?
Well, you cannot stop anyone from making any allegation, either wild or indeed reasonable or out of context. But one thing I can tell you clearly, that it is not part of the agenda of this government to witch hunt. But then if there are grievances or there are allegations, they are naturally consideration It's not that I am saying not his position now conclude by way of adjudging the allegation of his excellency, political or otherwise. One thing that I can clearly say is there is an allegation and then taking and doing the needful in terms of ensuring justice, fairness, and equity of it is now considered applied and
Does that also mean that your party will not spare even its own members and will not shield anybody, even if it's a member of the APC?
Welcome, my amazing viewers. Thank you so much for joining me on my program once again. I appreciate you wherever you are joining from. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please kindly subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell so that you'll be notified each time I upload a video. You will be among the first to receive it. Thank you so much, and remember, if you are joining me from Africa, Asia, Europe, America, Australia, or any part of the world, I thank you very much for your contribution. Please, each time you watch my video, go to the comment section and put down your comments. That is where we learn from each other. We learn a lot from the comment section. I don't speak alone. I am speaking with you. You can equally contribute. You can criticize if you so desire, but do it constructively so that we can learn from one another. That is why we're here. Thank you so much for joining. Remember, you have to say what is happening in your own area. Whatever happens, if you see something, say something. Don't be silent. We cannot allow the conventional media to continue to change the narrative. We cannot allow the conventional media to continue to play down the situation. we will continue to bring the situation the way it is and say its straight the way it is without hating anybody. We are not preaching hate speech. We are not talking down anybody. We say leave and let's leave. And for those who say we will not leave, just like the Fulani Jaja we have said, they will not leave either.
But one thing, reasonable grounds are first, prima facie case seems to be established, proof of evidence will have to be developed, and then eventually prosecution will take place. So there is nothing that is hidden. As far as prosecution is concerned, it is traditionally a public prosecution. And again, the background of the fact that prosecutions, as far as Nigeria is concerned, are carried out in public. Nothing will be hidden, both in terms of names, associated facts, and circumstances.
When will this be? When will, if you say they're not hidden, it's been a while now. This is probably the third time, Minister, that you and I are having this conversation. And you said
it can be hidden
because Nigerians are agitating. They want to know, name names. Let us shame these people.
You see, in terms of prosecution, the truth of the matter is we have established a tradition of taking even the Boko Haram before the court of law, and they were prosecuted and convicted. So at the point of arraignment before the court, there has to be a party charged. And then with that, the idea of perhaps maybe having someone, hiding the identity of someone does not arise. But you cannot stop work being in progress, and you cannot, in the circumstances of investigation and prosecution, be preemptive of the situation.
Minister,
again, the background of the proof.
You know the insinuation drawn to this. That the reason why you're not coming up with name is because your investigation is not watertight. That if you have your investigation and your evidence are watertight, you will be able to come up with names of the people behind. These are people who are financing the killings of Nigerians, innocent people who are killed in their homes, who are taken out of their communities and started ransack their communities. And you think that we don't need to know their names?
You need to know, you will know. That is the true position of things, and processes have been consummated in line with the dictates of the law, and necessary orders where the need for so doing of taking people to custody for the purpose of concluding the investigation have been obtained judicially. Nobody is being taken to custody arbitrarily, and then work is in progress, and I assure you,
when are we likely to get their names?
You will be happy with what we are doing as a government once in a couple of weeks. Perhaps these people are charged and arraigned before the court.
Maybe because before the end of this month?
Well, certainly in a number of weeks, you will have something tangible and cogent from
who will be expecting, Honorable Minister? I trust that you will do it. If you say so, if you say that it will happen in a number of weeks.
When I gave you my commitment in terms of proscription of the bandits within a matter of hours, eventually the order was obtained and then gazetted accordingly. So I am a man of honor and not out of pride, but then when I make promises, I keep to them.
Okay, we expect that. Honorable Minister, let's look at the issue of the likes of Nnamdi, Kanu and Sunday Igboho. For Sunday Igboho's matter, what is the latest on that?
Well, it is a matter being prosecuted at the, at a foreign country, and within the context of that prosecution, one thing that is apparent and visible is he has been taken to custody, and taken to custody on account of breaching laws applicable in a foreign nation, and with that in mind, he is being prosecuted.
So there is no effort in bringing him back home?
Well, we allow the law of a nation that was indeed breached to take its natural course, and then perhaps maybe thereafter bringing him back home after the conclusion of the trial over there for the purpose of facing the Nigerian law that was accordingly breached. So the position of things is we are not interfering in aborting the existing prosecution at the foreign land, taking into consideration that the laws that were alleged to have been breached were indeed the laws of the foreign nation.
So there's no possibility of a political solution into the matter?
Well, in terms of political solution, taking into consideration his standing trial in a foreign land, what political solution can we bring to bear in terms
because
of...
the agitation is there. It may be standing trial, but the agitation, the same thing goes for Nnamdi Kanu.
Well, not
any possibility of political resolution or intervention?
Not in terms of what he is standing trial for at the foreign nation. So perhaps maybe those considerations may be considered or perhaps may be brought to bear when he is eventually brought back after the conclusion of the trial at the foreign nation.
What about Nnamdi Kanu? Is there still possibility?
You see, in terms of
political
prosecution, you cannot rule out any possibility. In terms of prosecution, the laws of the land naturally takes their natural course, and in our laws there are a lot of possibilities. But one thing I can tell you, as it is now, the law is taking its natural course.
All right. Let me take you to one thing that a lot of Nigerians will be expecting you, because the president has said that you advised him and that he's going to listen to you. The last time also, you did say that you've given your advisory to the president on the issue of Electoral Act Amendment Bill. The president rejected it perhaps based on your advisory and the chief law officer of the land. But are you satisfied with what the National Assembly has done and transmitted to the president?
Well, in terms of satisfaction, honestly, it is premature for me to conclude. Taking into consideration, I can admit to you that the electoral bill was only received in my office this afternoon as I was preparing to come over for this engagement with Channels TV. So I have not taken steps to review the content and context of what has been presented for consideration of the president. So it is premature and preemptive for me at this moment now to arrive at any conclusion, taking into consideration that I have not gone through the documents to understand what it contains and then analyze them in accordance with the Constitution, in accordance with the prevailing laws.
But,
yes.
For someone who has been involved in political party activities, I seem to want to assume that you love democracy and you want the advancement of same.
And I have worked in advancement of democracy, and democratic system.
Are you optimistic about helping the president to pass what he says he wants to leave as legacy of good elections for Nigeria? If Nigerians are saying that they want the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, are you optimistic that this bill might get passed by the president?
Well, honestly, without reading through, I am not in a position to assess whether the bill indeed has factored the national and public interest as against selfish interest among others, whether it is a bill that can pass the test of constitutionality and legality.
If you are not satisfied, you advise the president against it?
Certainly, if I'm not satisfied and if I am of the opinion that it is against the public interest, the national interest, and then against the dictates of democratic process, I will advise accordingly. But then one thing I can tell you, that we are all interested in leaving behind a legacy of a lasting democracy that indeed accommodates the collective interest of...
Thank you so much for your patience to watch from the beginning to the end. I hope you have learned something from the video you have just watched. The video you have just watched is to bring information to your doorstep and for educational purpose. It is not to demonize anybody. Let us watch continuously and see who can be able to make a sense out of every nonsense we are seeing. We must continue. We move. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what they say. They will kill us. We will kill them. At the end of the day, Biafra is here. Thank you for watching. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please kindly subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell so that you're notified each time I upload a video. You will be among the first to receive it. Thank you and remember blessed. Bye-bye. See you again.